And Fenwick had this small, thriving church, Congregationalist, I think. And he thought, well, if I go there, maybe I could do dramatic readings in churches. LA's a big place. They probably have lots of churches. So out he came, and he fell in love with LA. He just fell in love with it. He found it exciting and filled with stimulating intellectuals. Anything anybody wanted to study, he thought, is taught here in this city. Well, his idea of using churches as a lecture circuit really didn't materialize. But he decided to stay anyway. He liked LA. So he got a job in Venice as a purchasing agent for the city. And it was a perfect job, because most of the time he sat in his office and read. It wasn't like he had to work 8 hours a day. He had to do his work as it came in, but it didn't take up all his time. So he had a grand opportunity to read more and more. And he began to study everything that he could get his hands on. You know how it is when you're reading 5 books at a time? Do you do that? Yeah, me too. He was reading and studying everything. Literature, art, science, philosophy, and religion. And he was especially interested in this something that was called New Thought. That caught his attention. Because in some ways, it was parallel to Christian Science. It traced its origins back to the same man who had healed Mary Baker Eddy, Phineas Parkhurst Quimby. But this New Thought, it was looser than Christian Science. It was more open. And the followers were more interested in the results than in theology or revelation. Now, while he was working as a purchasing agent, he became friends with the city engineer. His name was H.B. Aiken. And they spent a lot of time, their offices were across the hall from each other. They spent a lot of time discussing everything that Ernest was reading. And during this time, he discovered the writings of Judge Thomas Troward. And when he discovered Troward, his quest for knowledge grew even stronger. And he continued his studies, and he continued his discussions with the engineer. And one day, Mr. Aiken came to him and suggested that he invite a few friends to his home so that Ernest could come and talk about some of these things that he'd been reading about. It was the first talk he ever gave in that man's living room. And it led to others in the homes of other friends. And it went on, and the rest, as they say, is history. At the very least for this day. Because we don't have all day. But I do want you to know that as a teenager, Dr. Holmes asked himself, what is God? Who am I? What's my purpose? Why am I here? Aren't those the same questions we ask ourselves? When we try to figure out life and our purpose in it, and we're on that road to something greater than we knew yesterday, we ask ourselves those very same questions. These questions sent him on a lifelong search for answers. They send us on that same search. His studies convinced him that no one doctrine contained the whole truth, a truth that was unknown to anyone else. But rather, when you look at all the teachings, including this one, all of them, it's a synthesis of all teachings. That's what the truth is. We don't hold a truth that no one else has. And when we think we're more or better, or that we know something, or that when we say to our friends, if only he would come to church, he would know the truth. No. We're all in the right place, regardless of what it is. I'm a minister of the science of mind. My daughter, who lives a wonderful life and is very connected to God and one of the most giving people making a difference in the world, is in a Bible-based Christian church. That's where she needs to be. That's where she finds her inspiration and touches the spirit within her, just as we do here. There's not one teaching that holds the only truth. It runs through all teachings. And this teaching, he looked at as a synthesis of all teachings. And he left us with the greatest gift that we could ever receive. He left us with the results of his search. And he asked that he not be put on a pedestal, that it be understood that we're all the same, and that we're all searching just as he did, and that it was simply his purpose to pull it together in a way that would allow him to grow, and that would allow him to share it with the rest of the world. And in our own way, we're all on that same quest that Dr. Holmes was on. He left us with the tools to discover for ourselves our own magnificence. He left us with the tools to discover our oneness with Spirit. And discover is the operative word here. Because he understood the imperfection of human nature. It is through our mistakes and our failures that we learn to lift ourselves from a life where we're on automatic pilot that seems to invite struggle and doubt, to lift ourselves above that to a place where we are willing to express, where we are willing to risk, and we are willing to forgive. Dr. Holmes wasn't perfect, and he didn't ask us to be. He simply asked that we become aware of the direction of our thoughts so we can awaken our senses to our own magnificence. This month, we'll continue to explore the basics of this teaching together. So I hope you all join me next week as we look at our divine nature. And so it is.